just briefly to mention that I have been dealing with communications since the times when probably the most of the participants in this conference haven't even been born, and it was beginning of end of 90s when there was conflict, and I was dealing with humanitarian communications. Later on, I dealt with all kinds of communications, especially when I worked with the United Nations Development Program. And it was starting with some, let's say, corporate crises and floods in the country, etc. So in the spirit of multifunctionality of teams that you mentioned at the beginning in your introduction, I tried and prepared a document which actually should have elements that can be used by all organizations. Let's say a little bit of a general document, because every organization basically should have a mechanism for a quick response to a range of natural or human-caused. Sorry? Oh, nothing. Human-caused or man-made crisis. The purpose of such a document that everyone should have, every entity, would be to mitigate the effects of whatever is perceived as a crisis, to provide credible and accurate response and quickly, and to demonstrate professionality and accountability of the organization, an ability to maintain and retain confidence, both externally and internally. Principles of crisis communications have something to do with whatever serves as a threat to basic structures, to fundamental norms of a system under highly uncertain circumstances. What I prepared is actually, just a second, is non-prescriptive. It means that it can serve to all the entities, also public administration, but also other types of organizations, to further strengthen the readiness for any types of crisis. This document should also help clarify some dilemmas that you might have on what activities you should undertake. This document should indicate some practical advice to help organizations to establish plans and to deal with problem solving. Some principles, apart from those that you cannot see now, actually, and you will see it in the document, will include being proactive, being analytical, taking care of people, and being responsible in terms of looking ahead, planning what might be the crisis that might affect your organization, analyzing in terms of defining what kind of problem the organization is facing, whether it is a problem that should be solved internally or it should be dealt with as a typical crisis. What every organization needs to take care of is to take care of its people first. If business, for example, you must not put ahead information about material losses. The first and foremost issue is people, how you deal with people and taking care of people internally. And there is quite a segment in the document that will give you some hints as people who do not deal with communications, how your crisis teams should make plans in the way for you non-communications people to always be involved, to always be informed, to always be taken care of. There is a segment including elements of a good crisis communication plan, and again, each organization or entity should see what is really important for them, and it's usually media, it's usually this communication with external publics, not just media, but also your partners, stakeholders, general publics. It is important that you stick to general values and to the internal values of the organization. It is important also that you be part of a system established usually by your crisis communications teams. You will find who is supposed to be part of such a team. You will see how these teams should be organized, and these teams should pose some bylaw, or let's say maybe sounds too harsh, book of rules in terms of how social media will be organized. I didn't want to include in the document what exactly is to be done by the social media during a crisis, but I just wanted to put a frame that will use for your further development of the entire internal plan.
Thank you, Nadica. I guess we can be further on interested to look after the document that you shared with us. Once again, I would remind all of our participants that even though crisis management sounds as if something that you're already aware of, that you are already prepared for, indeed it is lacking even in the big corporations. And I'm not undermining your work, incredible public administration system. However, many times we see the least important to actually tackle how we are actually going to do it, both internally and externally. And Nadica, as a PR and a communication expert, of course, emphasized also a lot on this visibility and communication plan, which is sometimes of crucial importance, especially in the times of crisis. So what I would do now is I would suggest you to go back to the document that Nadica sent you and shared with you, because it's really valuable. I would treat it personally as a roadmap for the next steps. Basically, it can be reflected on what you're already doing, giving it a frame that Nadica developed. And also, in case of some special need, you can ask for further help, or you can rely on your internal strengths and develop it further. So I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion, hopefully with Nadica in some next phase as a follow-up, because I think it would be really much important to take care of this. And I will remind all the participants here that ReSPA may have the response to any of the presentations content by in-country support mechanism. So you heard Tihana, so there is a lot of things to do in the quality management. Again, there is a lot of things to be developed in terms of crisis management. Nadica is there. Milena Lazarevic will be speaking later on about how civil society organizations will help us and will help you. So that's another portion of topics that can be further developed, she and her team. So I would put the floor back. I would thank to Nadica, and I would put the floor back to Tamara Srzentic and Lover in Sacramento in behind her, and ask her what should we do the next.
Actually, I don't want to take any more time from this next speaker, magical speaker, as you would say. Goran Dimis is going to start speaking to opportunities in a pandemic and beyond, and really beyond.
Wow, Cyprus call.
So the floor is yours, Dimis.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Goran. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first part of the session, Opportunities in a Pandemic and Beyond. The second part will be on Friday at 11:30, at the end of the seasonal school. So I'd like to begin with a story, and it's a story about a banker and an entrepreneur who are walking by a river when a little frog comes hopping towards them. And the froggy says, please, gentlemen, would one of you please take me to your home and feed me and look after me and keep me happy for 1 year? And then at the end of the year, if you kiss me, I will immediately become a handsome prince and a very rich one too. And of course, I shall reward you handsomely and make you a very, very rich man. The entrepreneur immediately grabs the frog and puts it in his pocket. And the banker laughs and says, "Oh, come on, my friend, you don't really believe that this ugly beast will turn into a prince, do you?" "Of course not," replies the entrepreneur. "But imagine what you can do with a frog that can speak." So I'd like you to reflect on this question for a moment. What is it that made the banker see and grab the opportunity? The entrepreneur. What is it that made the entrepreneur see the opportunity and grab the opportunity, while the banker just stood there making sarcastic remarks? So please make a note in the chat area for me. Right? Well, what do you think? Why did one person grab the opportunity and the other one didn't? So the chat is open for you, and I will make some comments on the chat. Thank you for your kind words, Vanya. So I'm looking at this chat line. Tamara is saying one of them had a framed mindset. That's a very, very, that's a very intelligent comment. Somebody had a framed mindset and it just wouldn't go outside. It wouldn't see that frog in a different ways. Open-minded, somebody is saying. Goran is saying the other one was a foresight thinker. He was thinking farther on. Then I get the word creativity. So what was that creativity? They were looking at the same thing, but somebody was looking and making different connections and imagining different things. I'm getting the word ambition from Mahir. Ambition, so the entrepreneur probably all the time is looking at how to do new things in his life. Tihana is saying different perspectives. But what is it that makes someone get into that mindset where we're looking at the different perspectives rather than just watching and making sarcastic remarks? Any more comments? Please put them in the chat line. I'm getting from Tamara less judging and more perceiving. And that's interesting too. Perhaps the banker was in a judgmental framework. Oh, a frog, kissing a frog. Oh, it's not possible for that frog to turn into a prince. And maybe all that stopped him from looking at the opportunity. There's another one, positivity. There's an intention to see opportunity. And this intentionality is perhaps very interesting. I'm getting Liridi and Jenny seeing opportunities where the banker didn't. So what is it that some people see the opportunities and the others don't? I don't think all entrepreneurs are like this and all bankers are like that. Let's not completely stereotype people. But once again, for the last time, why do some people see the opportunities and others don't? Any other comments? Mindset, we're coming back to this mindset. Open mind, there's a lot of things in here. And these are the things that are confining us. Open heart, there's an emotional thing to it as well. It's also not being stuffed up, right? Okay, thank you all for listening and for participating in the chat line. I will now simply say, share my screen. There we are. And opportunities are in fact around us all the time, especially in difficult situations and also during great pandemics. During the Great Plague in Florence in 1348, this is in the Middle Ages, Boccaccio wrote his masterpiece, the Decameron, which was a critique of religion and morality in the Middle Ages. In the early years of the 17th century, all theatres were closed like they are today because of the bubonic plague in England. And that's when Shakespeare wrote Antony and Cleopatra, and King Lear, and Macbeth. And the theatres were closed at that time. And during the Great Spanish Flu only 100 years ago, the Great Spanish Flu that killed millions worldwide, Pablo Picasso forever changed the way we see the world when he painted a guitar the Cubist way. Now, in the first 6 months of our pandemic of COVID-19, I have been so amazed by the great number of innovations. And the innovators were all people who saw the opportunities and took action. There were people who grabbed the frog that speaks. Consider masks to limit the spread of the virus. And masks, you know this, you were, I'm sure, on the internet as well. They were made in hundreds of different models. They were made by automobile manufacturers, people with sewing machines at home, professional designers, owners of 3D printers, sometimes with fancy designs or with integrated electronics too. I like this one because it's a marvelous one, because this is a transparent mask, and it allows us to see the lips and better expression. And I'm sure Naditsa will tell us this is really good for good communication. Then we had innovations which had to do with spatial organization. In this case, people organizing in parks to keep distances. Then there's spatial organization to discourage crowding in beaches. This picture is from Spain. And then there were all sorts of new furniture designs for meals and for conversations to keep eye contact. And furniture for safety outside, in this case, a park bench from a designer. And of course, remote work took off in workplaces of all types, even agriculture, everywhere. Whatever one could do remotely, one did. Here's a public sector innovation, in this case in Colombia, where cities simply very quickly created bicycle lanes to avoid the congestion of public transport. Here's a nice one from Singapore. In Singapore, there was a robotic dog who roamed around the parks telling people to keep distance from each other. So whenever they saw people who were too close together, the robot would give out a warning. And also warnings in different ways. This is in India. This is policemen who are wearing masks and giving guidance to people, to motorcyclists in this case. In Ghana, there was a taxi driver who had his customers sanitize their hands and wear masks before entering his car. And then there is distancing in restaurants. This is the American way of creating distance in restaurants. And this is the Japanese way of creating distance in restaurants. It's and deliveries went crazy all over the world. Here's a vampire that's delivering a pizza. And here is a traditional open-air market. But this open-air market now takes orders for home delivery. They didn't do that before. And deliveries are happening with robotic cars too. And what about entertainment? Live entertainment was really hard hit. It still is. Well, this is a rave party. It's a drive-in rave party in Germany. And look how many people came. There was also a virtual theater company. And I want to share my favorite one with you. This is in Barcelona's main concert hall, where musicians are playing music for the plants. Isn't this so poetic? Now, I've just shown you a very tiny sample of COVID innovations, and I am awestruck by the immense breadth and the depth of human ingenuity that came out during our pandemic. And I'm truly humbled by the huge number of new ideas that went live in the first 6 months of the pandemic. This is all in 6 months. And of course, now we're all seeking the new normal. And that's answers to the question, what is the new normal? What is the new normal? Let me suggest that the new normal is in part innovations that are directly related to the virus, like masks, washing hands, hygiene, hospital setups, physical distancing. They have a direct relation to the way we manage the virus. They might evolve, change, maybe even go away so we can really hug strangers when we feel like doing that. But then I call these meta-COVID innovations. These are innovations that already existed, but were accelerated by the virus and will continue well after. Vanya already hinted at this. He said things that were going to take 2 years happened in 2 weeks or even in 1 week. And if I single out a few, one of them is working remotely. Another one that is definitely going to continue and had started before as well is online shopping and entertainment. And most important is organizations going digital. And this is not just somebody simply inventing a mask or a new way of washing your hands or a new way of keeping distance. It's big organizations that are going digital. The digital giants, all of them, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Facebook, they all instituted remote working as a permanent feature of their businesses. But it's not just them. So have thousands of small offices, manufacturers, retailers, and restaurants, you name it. It will go digital much faster than ever. So I'd like to propose to you an individual challenge for this week. And please, it's work, it's very hard work. I am asking you to imagine one opportunity. Identify one opportunity for public administration in your country, or just for public administration. And you believe that that opportunity will bring some value in the future. So this is a challenge for you, and I'd like you to think about it carefully and write this up. Write it up as a specific answer. Don't just say digitalization or remote work. Make it a specific sentence or even 2 sentences maximum. Okay? So you have a whole week to identify one opportunity for public administration and just write one sentence to describe it, because we'll do more work on this on Friday. And there's something in red, and that's my advice. Do not fear crazy ideas. The more unusual, the better. The more unusual, the better. If you want inspiration, there's a site which is covidinnovations.com. And on that site, I believe you will find more than 1,000 things that actually happened in the first 6 months or so of this year. So please note this challenge. Please think about it day and night and write it up before Friday. So see you on Friday with your great ideas, and thank you very much for your attention.
I don't know about others, but I'm hypnotized completely by this amazing presentation.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you.
Thank you, Demis. Now we have Our Lady Milena Lazarevich, who is going to be talking about mechanisms of CSO support to the governments in the process of development of policies, institutions, and measures that will address the country's problems. So, Milena.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Thank you very much to Goran and the guys from ReSPA for inviting me. And I have a very difficult role to speak after Demis, who was so inspirational, and that is definitely not easy. But I hope that my presentation will at least offer some ideas and thoughts to inspire the work in the next few days. Simply because, as someone who has worked both on the side of the government, I started off my career as a civil servant, and I was a civil servant for 6 years before moving on to the civil society sector back in 2011 and co-founding a think tank in Belgrade, which from the very beginning was very much oriented towards creating a constructive relationship with the government, especially the one in Serbia. But of course, since we are very active through our regional network, also on the level of the whole Western Balkans, we have also been quite active in trying to do that in the region as well. And I think that, I've built my presentation not based on some formal documents and not based on some theory, but really based on my personal experience, which has provided me, I think, with a good overview of what are the preconditions for creating a good and constructive relationship between the civil society and the government. And I really believe that this is a necessary ingredient in creating a society based on trust and increasing the social trust in the society, and also in developing a culture of dialogue in a society. And I think that most of us might agree that here in the Western Balkans, we're not the best at developing a culture based on dialogue, this culture of dialogue. And I also believe that our esteemed colleagues who come from the region but actually work in the United States can probably attest to that. I mean, I haven't lived in the United States, but I graduated from an American university. And for me, really studying at an American higher education institution exactly, let's say, inspired me to think about how to really be able to disagree but still have a constructive relationship, to be able to disagree and have divergent views but still be able to work together. So this is why I'm really happy to be able to contribute to this conversation today. And let me try to share my screen now to share my presentation. Okay, let's see if this will work. Can you all see my presentation now?
Yes.
Can you see my screen? Okay, good. Just let me turn on the slideshow. Okay. So, starting to speak about CSO-government relations, we can identify all sorts of different relationships, starting from the ones that are, let's say, very much on the negative side, and where we have this atmosphere of tension, where civil society organizations are even somehow plugged into the role of criticizing the government by default. This kind of relationship can very much come from mutual, let's say, lack of trust, but also it can come as a result of let's say, lack of really democratic values in a society. We can have a relation where there isn't necessarily too much trust, but where the role of the civil society as an external control mechanism is accepted. And the civil society still provides, let's say, very much a kind of input which is based on lack of trust in what the government is doing, and constantly trying to exert some sort of control on the government. Then we can have a role of civil society in providing constructive pressure to the government to speed up reforms, where you can identify champions and let's say promoters of reforms and changes in a government, and the civil society is there to sort of provide constructive pressure by providing evidence-based input, by providing constructive input into pressurizing for those reforms to happen. And then we can have, let's say, more of a relationship which is based on collaboration and cooperation. That can be as a minimum based on consultations. So the government simply opens space to get some inputs from the civil society. This is what we usually see as, in most cases, see as the maximum of cooperation in our countries, with some exceptions that I will go to in a second. But where basically this input of the civil society is just provided mainly as a one-sided, as a one-way process. Let's say a more advanced way of supporting the government is through co-creation, and I think that the OGP, open government process in the region, has started to embed and started to develop these practices in the countries in our region as well. This is still quite limited, but co-creation really means that civil society organizations sit together with the government and develop policy and strategic documents. In some countries in the region, such as in Serbia, we now also have these kinds of processes going on in development of some sectoral strategies. For example, the Serbian government, the Serbian Ministry of Public Administration and local self-government has included the civil society in this way in the creation of the strategy for public administration reform. Of course, co-creation can only make sense when it goes all the way, let's say, to the very end of the development of a strategic document, and this is where we usually still have some drawbacks in the application of this mechanism in our region, and maybe later on through the chat, or however we can go into this, because I think I don't have actually the time to go into those details right now. Of course, there can also be support through co-implementation of policies. I will go over some basics of that. I'm not a big fan of that, especially as a think tanker, but of course there are some civil society organizations whose role in co-implementation of policies is crucial. For example, in service delivery, especially service delivery functions in the area of social services, co-implementation is quite important to the performance of the core government functions. So what is the value of having civil society participation in policy making? Okay, civil society definitely has some of its own expertise, and considering that the governments very often, especially in our region, lack expertise and capacities in some areas, especially in some areas which are not so traditionally the focus of the government's policies, such as gender equality, for example. Civil society can bring in a lot of expertise. This is where, and also, as I mentioned here, some areas of human rights more generally. And it does provide an independent external contribution that does not, in most cases, oblige the government, but it can provide, let's say, an additional value to the government's work. In terms of policy monitoring, the civil society provides external monitoring, and this is where it is very important to keep in mind the difference between external and internal policy monitoring. We as a think tank, we do a lot of external policy monitoring, and we have come across criticism coming from government institutions saying, well, why are you monitoring our work when that is essentially our job? Well, aside from the fact that in many cases the institutions in our region do not provide and do not perform the basic internal policy monitoring that they're supposed to do, the very purpose of external monitoring is different from internal monitoring. So internal monitoring that is done by the government is their own view of how they're doing things, and external monitoring is there to also from an external perspective provide a corrective of that, and to also make the government perhaps in the long run be more objective about its own internal monitoring functions. So if the civil society, for example, exposes and shows that certain data are different from what the government shows in its own monitoring reports, this is sort of a corrective mechanism. And I will just also mention that external monitoring can be either let's say international or domestic. What we do as civil society is really domestic bottom-up external monitoring, because we also are aware that, for example, in the area of public administration reform, external monitoring is also done by Sigma, OECD, and of course the European Commission, and this is the case in many policy areas. Why is it important to also have domestic external monitoring? Well, first of all, because that stimulates internal accountability in a society. So we in the civil society are very often witness to a paradoxical situation that our governments and our political elites appear more responsive to external conditionalities and international conditionalities than to the very requests and demands coming from the civil society and from their own citizens. So the civil society, through external monitoring, through its own domestically driven external monitoring, can correct this in the long run. I will not go into the example of Weber 2.0, but I know that this project that we're implementing is kind of maybe the reason why I was invited to contribute to this. But I will write in the chat the website of this initiative. It's a regional initiative funded by the EU, and maybe if you're interested, you can find out more about it. But this is precisely one example of domestically driven external monitoring by civil society. As I said, the civil society provides its own angle in either monitoring or co-creating or contributing to the creation of policies. And it's supposed to provide a view from the real world and based on the contacts with beneficiaries, with the citizens. It is supposed to bring information and data from the field with a focus on the citizen and the user, and especially taking care of the vulnerable groups, the ones that are often forgotten in the policymaking by the government. Very often our governments lack the mechanisms and the formats through which they can make sure that their policies target let's say everybody to the extent possible in the same way, and that no categories of citizens are forgotten. Why I'm always saying is supposed to, it's because unfortunately the civil society organizations do not always take this view. And I think that for us in the civil society, this is very much something that we need to remind ourselves of. But I also think that it's important for the government, when selecting who to cooperate with in the civil society, to also try to focus on those that do bring them exactly this view from the vulnerable groups and from the real world, not just the expert view. Because if you just want the expert view, you can just hire experts. How is it done? Collaboration with the civil society. Well, civil society can perform either independent or commissioned research and analysis based on either quantitative or qualitative analysis, especially when trying to bring the view from the field, from the citizens and users. Quantitative, of course, can bring the power of numbers and show how large-scale certain phenomena and certain requests are. And on the other hand, qualitative has the in itself the power of story and the power of case studies. I'm getting a lot of noise from somebody. Ernest, so somebody needs to mute them, or maybe as a co-host I can do that.
Just mute it. Just mute it.
Good, thanks. And also civil society can do service provision to citizens, as I said. Civil society can do that on behalf of the state. So it can, for example, legislation in the area of social services very often recognizes civil society organizations as providers of services, but it can also do that as replacing a gap that it sees in the performance of specific core government functions. For example, in the area of free legal aid, for years we have seen that civil society organizations have provided this role. Then another example I can think of is also SOS centers for women who are victims of domestic violence. For years, not only in Serbia, but in other countries of the region, civil society organizations were performing this role because the state wasn't. What are the different venues for contributing? It can start from very basic things, just civil society organizations providing reports and analyses and trying to advocate them to the government. It can go through participation in working groups or task forces for the design and development of specific policy documents. It can go through public consultation and events. Very often, even conferences and roundtables can be used as effective venues for delivering the messages and exchanging views and ideas. Closed-door meetings can be a very effective way because it allows the civil society, when it wants to do something in a very constructive way, to do it in a way that it doesn't shame or blame the government publicly, but that it actually does deliver a message, especially in some sensitive areas. And also civil society in many cases provides even capacity building for civil servants. As I mentioned, in some areas where the government lacks capacity, these can be either specific areas of specific skill sets, or for example, a mainstreaming of gender equality and other similar topics where really the civil society has developed and acquired quite a strong capacity over the years. So this contribution can also be provided through capacity building. And what are the preconditions and what should both of the sides ensure and what they should not do? Well, first of all, the civil society has to have sufficient or basic expertise and experience in the area in which it works and where it wants to contribute. So it needs to know, civil society representatives need to know what they're talking about, and they need to ensure to send people who have sufficient capacity. It also needs to ensure a politically unbiased approach. So even if we don't like the government in terms of who the political leadership is, we need to make sure to be politically neutral and politically unbiased when speaking and when working with government institutions. It also needs to have a basic understanding for the specific constraints of the administration. So basic knowledge of how the government works internally. And this is, I think, where civil society needs more capacity building, and why bringing civil society representatives together with government representatives in various events, such as this training, which was actually also opened very politely and wholeheartedly to civil society representatives. This is why this is extremely important, because it brings the two sides together and creates more of an understanding of how each of them works. It needs to place its pressure at the right point. So it doesn't make sense to focus on lower level civil servants for highly sensitive political issues, because the lower level civil servant will not be able to exercise the change within the government in such a case. So you need to know where to locate in terms of the right institution, in terms of the right level in the hierarchy. And it also needs to ensure patience and steady pressure. So things cannot change overnight, and there needs to be a process and time to achieve a change. What civil society should not do, first of all, it should not replace the core government's functions. So the government should not expect it, and the civil society organizations should not try to actually produce strategies and legislation for the government. That is not its place. It should not make requests which are impossible without attempting to understand limitations. So if we know that we do not have some basic capacities for a specific area, we cannot expect the government to now launch some extremely advanced practices in a specific area. So there needs to be an understanding of the situation at present. And the civil society should not treat the government as a monolithic structure. There needs to be an understanding that various actors inside of the government have also diverging interests. For example, we work a lot in the area of civil service reform, and we know that the leadership, the political leadership, does not have the same interests as the civil servants with whom we very often work. So we try to find champions and promoters of civil service reform within the civil service to try together to push towards the political elites to implement civil service reform. So this is extremely important to understand. What should the government ensure? Well, first of all, there needs to be a good understanding of let's say good control of expectations. So a good understanding of what is possible in terms of achieving a relationship. Very often civil society organizations go out of co-creation and consultation mechanisms and processes very disappointed because the government does not explain, the government representatives do not explain their own limitations in terms of capacities, in terms of the procedures from the very start. And I can also provide some examples later on if there is an interest, but in the interest of time, I will now proceed further. There also needs to be basic sufficient internal capacity in the government to communicate, engage with the civil society and provide feedback. So there needs to be feedback in these joint, let's say, collaboration mechanisms, because if you just ask for something and do not give anything back as a response, you will damage the very basis of trust which is needed for these mechanisms to function. And there needs to be also patience and flexibility, because working together between these two sectors is always a learning experience, and it's always a process. So there needs to be also an understanding and flexibility that, you know, people from civil society will not always be able to quote an article of a law that civil servants work with. So not being able to quote legislation does not mean that civil society representatives don't know what they're talking about. It's just that they speak a different language. And I very often joke and I say that civil society speaks policy and civil servants very often speak legal. And these are not necessarily the same languages, but with some patience and flexibility, it is possible to really understand each other and to converge. What the government should not do, first of all, it should not treat civil society representatives as its own experts. So it's not that civil society representatives will just do whatever the government tells them to do in a working group. They need to maintain their own independence, and the government needs to understand and to keep in mind that civil society representatives are independent participants in a process. Related to that, the government should not attempt to skew the civil society's angle or persuade them of something that they believe in. So they need to understand the difference in views and respect those differences in views and learn from that. It should also not retract and shut down upon criticism and pressure, because there needs to be a good understanding that this is. There needs to be a good understanding that this is precisely why civil society representatives are there, to sometimes provide criticism and to say what's wrong and to exert pressure on the government. And also, of course, I mean, it goes without saying, they should not treat civil society organizations as enemies. And this is something that we see very often happening, especially on the side of the let's say, more political levels of the government in our region, which essentially takes us down to this, let's say, worst possible relationship between the two sides. As I said, in the end, it's about building trust. And what changes at times of crisis? This is my last slide. Well, first of all, I mean, what we have seen through COVID-19 is that the government's focus completely shifts to crisis management. So somehow the focus on human rights and guarantees of human rights can simply go completely into the background. The civil society should be there to keep reminding the government that even in crisis management, human rights and guarantees are extremely important and that they cannot be forgotten. So this is why in the situation of crisis, the best possible role that civil society can exert is to analyze and look at what are the different impacts of the government policies and government actions on the different sides of the society and different target groups and different beneficiaries of specific services, and to try to remind the government and to show to the government who are the target groups and who are the, let's say, layers of the society and citizens who have been somehow missed out, or on whom these policies and actions have had a negative impact. One example I can provide is personal data protection and transparency in the implementation of various government actions during COVID-19, where actually civil society has been quite active, although in many cases that has happened in a very, let's say, in a very harsh way, through very harsh reactions on the civil society. Again, in many cases coming as a result of the lack of trust. But in any case, the government should be able also to listen to these concerns and problems, because in the end, this is what ensures that the impact of the government policies is, let's say, well balanced across various layers of society. I know that actually, according to the agenda, we don't have any time for questions, for the actual questions, but I invite everybody who wants to ask a question or make a comment to do that in the chat function. I will also look at any comments that maybe have been made during my presentation. And of course, I invite Goran and Slaven to share my email address if they haven't already, and I'll be happy to discuss with you further after this session.
So, well, first of all, so happy to see so many familiar faces, although it's in these very strange circumstances on which we already get used a bit, unfortunately, because we shouldn't, I think. We should celebrate of meeting each other and talking to each other in person, but nonetheless, I think it's still great that we can meet in this way for such an important topic. Secondly, many congrats to ReSPA for organizing this lovely initiative again. Last year we had a great time in ReSPA premises, but I think it's great that you took the challenge to organize the successful event from last year, to transfer it into a digital mode and to offer participants to participate in this way. So well done. As Goran said, what I will try to do in this short 20 minutes, and please cut me when needed, Goran or others, I will try to give you some insight into, yes, the work that Sigma does or has been doing and is doing, but also a bit wider, I would say, in some of the things that we have seen from OECD side, but also more in general. So it's not only purely OECD related. I also try to link to the things that I picked up from last year's seasonal school, but also things that I picked from some of the sessions that I was able to attend yesterday. So, if trying to summarize the past strange 8 months into 5 images in terms of what were like government's responses and public administration's responses into 5 images, I think I would do it in this way. And this is far from being academic or theoretical. I think it's just living through the things and the stages that most of us has been going through. To putting it more, up standard to an audience that deserves this kind of images, this is actually the same kind of image. These are what I would call the 5 R's. This is like the government responses through this strange time of crisis. So you can see on the one hand you have the impact of the crisis, and of course this graph I came up with this design myself. So in some of the countries the curves are running in a different way, unfortunately still, but in the early days this was like a kind of the prediction. So 5 phases through which governments went and are still going, and maybe some still hopefully will go in the future. The first phase was this reaction, the panic in my first image. This was like, oh my God, what is happening? Close down all the windows, all the doors, but hold on, we are public administration. We cannot just close the shop and just hide inside and can't do as anything is happening. So we have to respond. And this is like a very important second stage, to organize the response. And this is, I think, what public administrations all over the world, and also from your region, Western Balkan region, I think what you have been doing, at least trying to do in most of the cases, is to provide a sufficient response to this emergency situation. Coming up with solutions. And what I also showed in my previous images is like, well, we have to think fast, but even act faster. So we have to improvise, we have to be agile, we have to be innovative, whatever that means. But it meant action. Action. Thinking, yes, but even acting faster. The stage where many governments and public administrations are in, or were in, before also the curve went back up again, is also in this kind of recovery, in finding and already learning what we have been doing in this crisis mode of reacting and responding. Try to also look for workable solutions without this recovery mode. And then lastly, this reform or reinvention kind of stage, I think this is something where I hope that we will come into, where governments also learn from this whole situation we have been going through, learning from things that we have been installing on a very pressured mode, that we have been learning how to do things differently, but also rethinking about things that we have put in place in a hasty way, which were maybe not the best things, so that we can also allow us to rethink again some of the measures, tools, systems, procedures that we have been installing under this huge pressure, that we might also need to rethink again in order to improve for the future. For the good readers on this early morning, I call this 5R, and I only have 4 on the screen now. And that's because the 5th R, this is this readiness. This is the overall maturity, because how would I call it? The way that organizations and public administrations have been going through these phases, or are going through these phases, is of course much predetermined by the state of affairs, the readiness, the maturity that they were already in. The way that organizations and governments respond, of course, if you were already working in a digital way in the past, it probably was much easier to respond in a very timely and effective manner than if you were not. But also in terms of mindsets, in terms of culture, what you have in an organization already present, also allowed organizations to really think fast. And as I said, even act faster. So this underlying readiness, maturity, you can call it agility or resilience or innovation capacity, whatever, this has turned out to be crucial. Crucial on all different levels. The level of the public administration in general, yes, but also on an organizational side. Tihana spoke yesterday about quality management instruments. For sure, quality management instruments, they have this potential within them to enable, to prepare organizations, well, under normal circumstances, but also they should create the scene for this, well, unprecedented kind of times. So organizations that had already this mindset of thinking fast, acting faster, acting agile, be open for new things, creative things, they might have been able to act even independently. Of course, on an individual level, being it us as citizens, but also us as civil servants, this also has proved to be very important. But also on the level of civil society. And I think here the presentation of Milena yesterday also demonstrated that the role of civil society as organized civil society and the interaction between government and civil society has proved very, very important in the past half year, 7-8 months. But also on a non-organizational, on a non-organized way. Volunteering, the whole bunch of volunteering campaigns, activities, organized, non-organized people taking up together with public administration in organizing the response, this has been very, very important in giving an answer to the crisis. And also here, everyone or many people were looking towards government and how the government reacted in terms of providing a sufficient answer. And I think this was very true. But I think also the government's capacity to coordinate and also to allow this kind of initiative for civil society in general, to really be partners in solving and in finding solutions, this has been a core task for government. So not doing everything itself, but also able to be really like a network. And I think also in your region, we have seen some very nice initiatives. I mentioned what the Serbian colleagues have been doing in designing a platform, virtual platform, digital platform, and also, well, trying to organize the supply and the demand. Where is the supply for volunteering initiatives? Where are also the campaigns for people to volunteer? Bringing it back to service delivery, because I said this is what has been very important. We could not just sit down and do nothing. Now, this service delivery was impacted by a very particular thing because of the COVID, of course. The physical contact, this was a very critical thing. A thing that, well, certainly in the first stages and still now, which was very much impacted. So thinking about service delivery, and to put it in this very, well, simple way of thinking, you have on the one hand the risk about the physical contact, the low physical contact, the high physical contact. And on the other hand, when designing and thinking about the services that we should provide, also about the urgency, the relevance. And we all know that not all services are as relevant as others during this crisis situation. So if you think about this, you could think about 4 different positions. A first position, this is the low left corner, this is about, well, it's low risk. We don't have these services with a lot of physical contact, but on the other hand, these are also not that essential for our users, our citizens, our businesses. So this is position 1. The top left corner, this is, well, it's still low risk in terms of physical contact, but these are already more important or highly important for our users, citizens, businesses, the kind of services that we provide. These are, by the way, these are the typical digital services. Digital services, no matter what. In countries, let's name them, like in Estonia, for example, where everything is digitized, well, they didn't felt in terms of service delivery that there was this kind of crisis situation. Everything went on as it was before because all the services are digital. So there was this low risk, and even if services were high important, they still could be provided. The below right corner, this is high risk, but non-essential. So maybe we should not focus immediately on continuing to deliver these. But of course, the top right corner, about the essential services, but only also high in risk, these are crucial, of course. And here we had to start reflecting, how do we do this? How can we work on this position? How can we still continue to provide the services under this high risk position? And then you have different scenarios. We have been working on these different scenarios also from within Sigma. We'll come to this later on. One scenario is that we can try to shift to position 2. This is what I said before. This is, and I come to these things in a bit more in detail, this is try to lower the risk of physical contact by making them digital or finding other ways in providing. Scenario B is about lowering the level of the crucialness, about the urgency. This is about delaying expiration dates. If your passport is expiring next week, well, can we delay these kind of timelines? But of course, the crucial ones, where we have to find an answer for, is about these scenario C, things that we cannot move left or below, but we still have to provide the services. Also there, we have been working within Sigma in finding some answers. Quickly talk you through some of these scenarios. Well, the going digital in a rapid way. This is what we have seen also in many of your countries, where certainly this crisis was turned into a catalyzing momentum in turning things digital. Certainly, organizations, governments, they were also confronted with decisions that they have been taking for decades. Suddenly things that were already on the shelf in terms of proposals, in terms of way of doing, even legal acts, suddenly things were possible because organizations, governments, they were forced in really pushing things through. So this going digital in a rapid way, this we saw, well, all over the world, but also in your region. Very important thing here is, well, for sure that organizations have installed very interesting digital ways of doing because of the crisis. But it also might have gone too fast. And the question, I think, and this is what I mentioned before, the things that we have to ask us is, well, to what extent are the things that we installed are also done in a good way? It's not because things are digital now that by definition they are good now. So I think we should carefully think and rethink the way that we have been digitizing. Is this always been done the best way? The other thing that I want to mention here is, well, digital is perfect, of course, but we know that also many people are excluded from the digital. So even if we go digital, always think about this different segmentation of users. Who are we serving and who are we not serving by going digital? So this multi-level service delivery, this will and is a crucial thing that we have to consider also under these crisis times. Many organizations have done, but just a word of small care. Also, in terms of the different stages, the short, the mid, the long term, the reaction, the recovery, and the reform or the reinventing stage, what we have seen in going digital is also a whole different kind of responses. In the first phase, it was much about communication. One-way platforms or two-way communication, hackathons, brainstorm events, but very much organized on information communication, which is okay. We are reacting, we are responding, and information was very crucial in those early days. In the recovery stage, what we have seen there is that digital also played a role of service delivery, but also in terms of providing digital solutions. I mentioned here the schooling, the digital schooling. I think we've also seen in your region that also national schools of public administration also went digital in providing their curricula, in providing their offer, which is super interesting. But also the link with working with different stakeholders together, civil society, academia, NGOs, also digital has proven to be very beneficial and adding value. The future, this is where for sure you have all attended these very nice webinars and thinking and readings about blockchain, about artificial intelligence, about other ICT infrastructures. So this is definitely where digital will play a crucial role also in the future. But again, mind the gap. This is crucial in this whole digital story, not to leave groups of people behind because of the digital. So this multi-channel approach will be even more crucial, we think. Just keep this one because I want to move on into this scenario B. Scenario B, where we couldn't just simply rapidly digitize everything. We couldn't move to this lower the risk. What we have seen then is that organizations, because they could not lower the risk, is that they then lowered the urgency. What I said before about postponing delays, about the extension of expiration dates, simplifying procedures, where before we had this official stamp, we had this official signature, that some of the steps now, as of a temporary measure, could be skipped. Again, for the future, maybe this is like a perfect thing and we don't need to reintroduce these kind of steps. But maybe for others, we have to rethink carefully if, well, they had a purpose maybe. So we have to, or we might need to rethink about these things also in the future. The mind here is mind the backlog. What we have seen now in many, and not only in your region, but also in Western Europe, is that many organizations, because of extending and postponing, that things have been piling up, literally or virtually. So these things will come back on our table. So also be prepared for this. If it's not now, it will be in the future. How do we deal with this? The big thing where we as Stigma have been working on is also about the scenario C, where we cannot risk or lower the risk, where we cannot lower the urgency, but we have to work in reopening or opening our ministries, public bodies, or agencies. Under the risks, the risk of social distance, the risk of queues piling up, the risk of public transport, where a lot of people come together as civil servants but also as users. So how do we work with this? And if you haven't seen these, what we have been doing with Sigma is that we have been preparing guidelines for roadmaps, how organizations can think about these kind of situations, how they can think about adapting workplaces for staff, but also for users under these strange circumstances, but still to do this in a safe manner. How do we take care of the distance? How do we organize the queuing system? How do we organize maybe extending the opening hours? These kind of things. So the very practical but essential things in organizing ourselves under the conditions, the strange conditions that are limiting our work. Secondly, how do we rethink, rework service delivery? I came already to the digital, but also other creative ways of organizing the service delivery. Home delivery, what we have seen. Organizing with civil society organizations, the delivery of services. Organizations have been really creative and inventive in rethinking service delivery. But also organizations have been extremely inventive in the HR management. I think all of us have faced this, have lived this, under these conditions, how we as civil servants have to operate in a completely other way as we did before. So HR is not only working at distance, but also how do we organize the coaching, the mentoring, the leadership, the communication, the knowledge management, all these kind of elements that have turned out to be crucial in these times. Very interesting thing, and with this I also would like to come to the end of my presentation, Morgan and colleagues. What we're currently working on, and I don't have the full overview of the colleagues that are present here in the webinar, but currently we have been working and are working with the Serbian colleagues, so with the Prime Minister's Office and also with the e-government and the Public Policy Secretariat, working on what they call service delivery continuity plans. So these are kind of, you can call it, well, contingency planning, business continuity planning, but really starting from the service delivery departure point. So identifying, coming to this kind of simple matrix that I showed before, identifying, well, what really are the services that we are providing? Identifying, well, for whom is this very important? Because it might be, if you are like, well, name something. Maybe something in our first eyes stupid. If you are a professional truck driver and your driver license is close to expiring, well, for you this is a very important thing that you have your driving license renewed. So thinking about the different services that we are providing, thinking about the different kind of user groups, so the segmentation, in this way also come to a kind of prioritization, linking this to the ways of delivering, so the different channels of delivering. Is this face-to-face? Can we do it remotely? How is remote organized? So thinking about all these different things in order to identify the risks and translate this into some kind of response. If we know all of this, well, how does this translate now into our HR, our people? How does this translate now into the processes? Do we have to rethink about different things? The example that I gave before, official stamps, signature, whatever. In terms of infrastructure, do we have to organize ourselves in a different manner? Building-wise, infrastructure-wise, queuing, do we have to work with appointment systems or not? These kind of very practical, logistical kind of things. Systems and tools, communication, information, knowledge management. Structures, as I said before, how do we work in teams? In terms also of communication, leadership, giving instructions, teamwork, communication, organizing digital meetings. So starting from very practical things in terms of what do we need to provide in terms of services? How do we do this? To whom? Identifying the risks and coming to the appropriate responses. So what we have been doing, as said, is that we have been working with the Serbian colleagues on this kind of guidelines. I think I can share with all of you that they're close to be ready. So we hope that this will be piloted in real life. And what we plan to do as Sigma is that we also organize some kind of webinar to explain this whole methodology, this kind of guidelines, much more into detail. Because we think they can be a very practical tool for the future, the near future, but also the long-term future. Because this is not only COVID-related, crisis-related. This is, should be normal, good management of the organizations. The conditions, of course, are particular, but many of the baseline philosophy, this is very much should be in line with what we do under normal circumstances. So here are some of the work in terms of references, what we have been doing. You can all find this on the Sigma website. You can also contact me. It's about first the overall strategic framework and the responses that governments in the EU countries have been providing as an answer to the crisis. First. Secondly, we have been working much, or the colleagues dealing with procurement have been working on the specificities of procurement under these crisis times, because as we all know, things, as I said, think fast, act even faster, and then the finance guys come and say, whoa, we have procedures for this, we have to properly procure. And probably they are right, we can't just do anything what we want. So also here, we have been working on the procurement directives. And then finally, also in the area of public services and HR, we have been doing, and the colleagues have been doing quite a lot of work into teleworking, online recruitment, for example, but also this roadmaps I've been mentioning. You can all find this via these links. Open for all questions. I think the time might be limited now, but please feel free to contact me later if you have any kind of questions. And thanks, and I hope I didn't took too much time for them.
Oh, Nick, this is really comprehensive. So many food for thoughts, and especially this contingency or plan for service delivery. Amazing things, really. Congratulations for you and Sigma team. It's that I'm a very big fan of service delivery. So we have so many things in common, and I'm jealous a bit because ReSPA could do the same. But I'm sure there would be the space to, in particular, replicate the methodology and understand it from perspective of implementation for the pilots. And I think this could be similarly done at the national level, like Serbian colleagues are now doing with you. Piloting, as you mentioned, I think it would be an amazing opportunity for the others to actually try to think a bit in this very comprehensive way. So each slide of yours is something that could be discussed for the entire day. And many thanks for this coordination and actually giving us a coordination system in a way how to cope with this very specific moment, which in accordance with your results we can use for the better. And the main feeling of me is that I'm somehow calm and ready to take part into the change rather than to be afraid from the change. So thank you also for bringing this type of peaceful information or information that we are reaching not only recovery but also stabilization, I would say.
Okay. Many thanks, Goran, for the feedback. As said, colleagues, I see some things passing by on the chat. Happy to provide some answers over the next couple of minutes. But always feel free to reach out, and happy to discuss and follow the Sigma communication definitely on this, as I said, on the roadmaps, or the service delivery continuity plans, because we really want to do something in the near weeks, months in terms of this image. Thanks for now.
Thank you, Nick. What Nick shared is going to be very much connected with Judy's piece later. But before Judy, we have our wonderful, legendary Dimis.
Wow, your introduction, Tamara, places a big responsibility on my shoulders. Good morning, everybody. I will present a very short session, which I first delivered in a training session for a ports authority. The training technique is a little unusual, so please bear with me and suspend your disbelief. I shall share my screen, here goes. And I shall first show you 6 playing cards. Now, mentally select one of the playing cards, please. Select one of the playing cards mentally. Do not type it in the chat area. Just note it on a piece of paper or simply remember it, and don't change your mind. Okay, I'm guessing you have it. One, embed one in your mind and don't change your mind. Now, I'm now shuffling these cards. And after they're well mixed, I shall lay them down again. But I will turn one of the cards face down. Here they are. Do you see your card? If not, it's because it's the one I have turned over. And this is proof that I have psychic powers. What else do I have to do to prove that I have psychic powers? Okay, I confess that this is just a cheap magic trick. And I want to teach you how to do it. Let's do it once again, and I will explain to those of you who have not already figured it out. Here goes. Here are the original 6 cards. You can think of one again if you wish. And now I will mix them and turn one over. And here is the new arrangement of cards with one of them turned over. Now, if you worked out how I did the trick, please write it down in the chat area. But I'm going to make things even easier for you. I'm going to let you see both sets of cards together. On top is the one you saw at first. At the bottom is the one after I shuffled the cards. So you can see that the cards in the second set are all different from the ones on the top row. And people do not notice this. And quite often they mistakenly assume that the face down card must be their card. So I want to congratulate the people who have really figured it out. Let me see if anybody has written anything in the chat line. There seems to be. Yes, Ernest said you changed all 6 cards. Ernest, congratulations. And Vladan is saying, well, we're the IT people. We can memorize anything on screen. There are too many geeks, says somebody. So congratulations to whoever worked it out before the explanation. But most important, I'd like you now to reflect on your experience. And again, type your comments in the chat area. The phenomenon of focusing on one element and missing the background, we often call this inattentional blindness. And magicians use it as a method of misdirection. I don't know, many of you might have watched the gorilla video The gorilla video is a video clip in which a gorilla is crossing a basketball field, but because you are asked to count how many passes there are between team members in the basketball team, most people miss the gorilla. Look it up, you can see it on YouTube, it's quite interesting. So inattentional blindness is when we're focusing on one thing and we're missing a lot of other things. So I would invite you now to think about inattentional blindness, and please type your comments in the chat area. I'm going to give you 1 or 2 minutes without speaking so that you can comment. And here are some questions to prompt your thinking. Why do we sometimes become victims of inattentional blindness? Can you think of examples from your workplace where we're focusing on one thing and we just miss what is going on all around? Now, can you get a little bit creative? Can you urge your problem-solving self to work? Can you think of ways of reducing inattentional blindness? And finally, this is a little bit of a larger question, but an interesting one as well, because we are talking about change, and especially change in crises. Why can "don't change your mind" be bad advice? Why can it be bad advice? And what we call mindset is really set, as if it's always set in stone. So I'll give you 1 more minute to type your comments, responses to these questions in the chat area, and then I will come back and comment on these. I see that Vanya has shared that wonderful video. It's a great video. Maybe I spoiled it all for you because I explained it beforehand, but for those of you who haven't seen it, it's really a wonderful video. Thank you, Vanya, for putting the link up. So I'm getting from Judy a comment that focusing on technology instead of the people is a parallel or of inattentional blindness. Gentian is saying that running to reach deadlines makes us unintentionally blind. Very good, thank you for this. We hurry up to give the answer because we're programmed to give the answer. Also, we might be focusing because to limit the stress is Goran's contribution, because it is stressful to try to see lots of things at the same time. Anna is saying work overload, and work overload leads us to choices, and sometimes we focus on something that is very small. Milos is saying basically a summary of all this. People normally focus on a limited number of things at once, especially when under pressure. And the last bullet, it's almost saying, Goran says, don't think out of the box, don't be creative. And sometimes crisis thinking, the urgency says, don't be creative, work on what you know, on the past, just make a judgment and move on. And it's not necessarily bad thinking, but if we do this all the time, it's not useful. Overwhelming situation, we perhaps lose touch with the people we are serving, or we lose touch of the core mission. We're doing a task, and we might focus on a detail of the task and miss the core mission or the essence, the purpose of what we want to do. That's Tamara's comment, thank you. And Tihana is saying, well, this is a little bit like siloism, I think, is what you're saying, Tamara. I'm working on my department only, and I'm missing the big picture. So we should be aware of the obstacles, says Dragana. We are multitasking most of the time, so focus helps us. And I have some solutions here from Anna. There's overload, we fall into the trap of hot topics, and the solution really is communication and brainstorming. Thank you for this, Anna. Brainstorming, I mean, we consciously mobilize our creative faculties to imagine new solutions. And yes, it is a way of overcoming inattentional blindness. There are Dragana is saying teamwork could help, talking about this with other people. Tamara is also saying, well, we adopt a culture and the norms of the place, and instead of being authentic and let our own inner child go, we conform to the logic of whichever organization or department or team we are with. And that's often unintentional, but it's often suboptimal as well. Tamara is also saying we need to unlearn and reprogram. Lirdi and Jenny, when we're focusing too much on one problem, then out of the box sort of is something else. It goes away, and we feel, possibly wrongly, that we don't need it. This is from Lirdi and Jenny from the Adisa Lab in Albania. Thank you very much. Well, I think we all understand that focusing on the little picture might hide the big picture. And we all know the metaphor of we can see the trees, but we don't see that it's a forest. Perhaps one technique would be to shift frequently from a narrow view to a panoramic view and then back to the narrow view, so that we don't lose touch of what links the two. Also, another learning might be, let's not ignore what's happening in the background. Couple more things. A deeper one on don't change your mind is in every change situation, you have to change your mind. I think everybody has to change their minds at some point or in some way. And the big question is, can you really change other people's minds if you can't change your own mind? And two other little points. It's not the magician who's fooling you. It's our minds. And the final one, critical thinking usually begins with very careful observation and understanding of the facts. So, and a lot of us, we just jump into critique, even creative thinking, we jump into creative thinking without a good background, without a good solid basis. Judy brought up yesterday, well, there is a first phase where we prepare. We don't want to work on a fake problem. We want to work on a real problem. So there's groundwork somewhere to be done as well. So remember this, critical thinking begins with careful observation. And I'll give you one final challenge. And this time, this one is with real cards. I promise you, these are real cards. Look, they're not printouts on a PowerPoint deck or whatever. They're absolutely, they're all real cards. And please watch and remember, don't believe what you see, and don't jump to conclusions. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day and get rid of inattentional blindness. Thank you. Let's start with a 60s song, which is all about change. This is from Bob Dylan. Come gather round people wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. And if your time to you is worth saving, you'd better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, 'cause the times they are a-changing. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
morning.
Good
Ciao,
morning.
David. Ciao.
And,
We are on fire.
good morning. Well, the subject is the challenges of change. And I really don't think there is anything more compelling to share than this song by Bob Dylan, which was written in it was written in 1960. It was published. Sorry, it was recorded in 1964. And really, here is the first verse. All the advice I am giving to companies and to my clients today, you'd better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. And I hope, I'm very glad that Bob Dylan moved on to get the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2016. But I'm not going to give you a concert. I'm going to ask you to join me in a workshop. And in this workshop, I shall ask you to split into 2 groups. And here's how it goes. If your last name begins with the letters A to M, you belong to the red group. If your last name begins with the letters N to Z, you belong to the green group. Please remember this. If people join along the way, I will try and repeat it. But for the 26 people who are here present now, please remember, you're a red group if your last name begins with the letters A to M, and you're a green group if you're in N to Z. So our topic today, and the one I will ask you to work on, is this one. How can we make sure change doesn't happen? And here I mean change in your organization or personal change. And it's not a typo. How can we make sure change doesn't happen? I want you to use your most subversive minds. I want to see your negativity come out. So red group, you have hard work to do, and you have about 2 minutes to do it. How can we make sure change doesn't happen? Red group only. Write your responses in the chat area. Any strategies, behaviors, and actions to resist change, or even boycott change. So please type them in the chat area. Those of you who are in the green group, if you're dying to be negative as well, you can do it too. But I would prefer that you read what the great red group is typing in the chat box. Please begin. How do you make sure change doesn't happen? 2 minutes, beginning now.
Dimis, can you repeat for the green group?
The green group, just go to the chat line and watch, have a look, read what the red group is writing.
Okay.
But the red group has already written, I think, 4 things. I'm going to leave the slide on for a moment. Remember, it's also personal change or organizational change. You hate change, red group. You want to prevent it from happening. And you have half a more minute. Be as extreme as you can. Make fun of all those evangelists of change who are telling you you have to change, learn new things. You don't like that. There, the 2 minutes are over. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I see that quite a lot of wonderful things have been written. Let's talk negatively about change to our colleagues. Tamara wants to create a negative gossip group. That's good. And Cheney will sabotage by throwing up policy rules that prohibit them from making changes. That's really good. So when you say we all have to go digital, Cheney's going to bring in a rule that says I need 5 copies of every document, and these have to be in hard copy and distributed personally all over the place. Following the same patterns is one of them. Focus on ourselves exclusively. That's Milos. That's nice. Get the union involved. And if the union is actively involved, they will trust them, they will find labor issues. Then Cheney is saying, let's talk about how change is scary and will cost people their jobs, frighten them, scare them, or just stay in our comfort zone and reject any other type of thinking. And Milos is saying, well, we don't take responsibility, it's other people. Speak about the uncertainty of change. Identify only the risks in the change. Now, these are all great. I really congratulate you for you made your very mean self come out in a very beautiful way, Red Team. Now, what I will do now, I will teach you how to twist. Aha. Now, I've been singing. You probably think that now I will be dancing. There you will be disappointed. Here's is how to twist. So a twist is basically finding the opposite of how we make sure change doesn't happen. So if, for example, somebody said, and somebody did actually write something like this, let's create a secret clique to boycott the change plan, your twist would be something like, let's create an open team of change champions, which is exactly the same. Instead of a boycott team, it's the opposite. Let's find a team of people who will talk about change enthusiastically all the time and actually do it. Or here's another example. How can we make sure change doesn't happen? Don't tell anybody about the change plan. Keep it a secret so that everybody is always confused. And you might twist that by saying, well, we're going to communicate. We're going to write a clear one-page manifesto with the vision, targets, and timelines of our change plan. And remember, each response, each negative response, you can twist it in more than one way, in many ways. So you might say, well, instead of don't tell anybody about the change plan, we can say, let's have short meetings every week that involving everyone at the micro level to discuss the change plans and overcome obstacles and have an agenda for the week. And let's do it all the time so that we communicate, even over-communicate about our change. So I believe you're highly intelligent people. Now you know how to twist. And this is now a chance for the green group to excel. And green group, you're going to answer the question, how can we make sure change does happen? And I will ask you to do it in the following way. Remember, you're a green group if your last name begins with the letters N to Z. So choose any one of the responses from the red group. You will find them in the chat area. And twist it to produce a positive outcome. Remember, you can twist some responses in more than one way. And then, if you want, you can take another one and twist it again. So I will give you 2 minutes to type your twists in the chat area. Green group, go ahead. Red group, if you want to do some twisting as well, it's okay. Beginning now, 2 minutes. One more minute. Green group, I will use a phrase I learned from Judy. Use your toxic positivity to twist the barriers to change. Okay, let's have a look at some of the twists. I'm just trying to, okay. Right, Anna. Anna is telling us, speak openly about the uncertainty of change. That was the negative one. And she's saying, let's twist it around and focus on the positive aspects of change, on what good will come out of it. Yes, we're not ignoring the fact that the process of change can be painful, but look what's going to come out at the end. Look how beautiful we're going to be. Look at keep emphasizing the positives. Tihana is saying, well, instead of frightening people, there's going to be something new that's going to threaten everybody. Encourage people and educate them. Give them a little bit of breadth in what the new things mean. Goran is saying, be open and transparent. Be honest. These are very important values, ways of being, as well as ways of thinking. And Goran is saying it's also a way of doing. He's saying organize well-being workshops. Organize workshops that are designed to change. Give people psychological safety as their anxiety looks that it is rising. Talk about also short-term and long-term benefits, and perhaps distinguish between the two. Thank you very much, Tihana. Vladimir has a good one. He says, stop watching Netflix and go out and do something. Okay, this is very important, and you said it in a very nice way, Vladimir. It's basically, don't forget, change is about action. It's not about talking. It's about doing. Yes, we have to think about what we do before and after if we're going to learn, but the doing is important, and you don't find it from Netflix. Nana Zeljovic is saying, don't fear change, live life, be brave, welcome change with an open mind. This is very important because it's somebody saying, well, it's all about me. I am the one who should not fear change. Live life, be brave, welcome change with an open mind. And believe me, if you're managing organized change in organizations, you have to keep looking at yourself. You cannot change others or expect others to change if you cannot change yourself. So make that effort for yourself. Slaven is saying, let us support, train, and encourage stakeholders. And this is another very interesting one coming from, Slaven also introduced the idea of encourage stakeholders. So it's not just us, it's not just our little small team, it's others as well who have an interest in our change and how well we do it. So involve them in some ways. And finally, Goran is saying, let's become accountable. Let's learn participatory techniques, but let's take responsibility for the change. There is an issue of personal responsibility and collective responsibility. Be careful if we always say, oh, it's us, it's always a collective responsibility, it's no good. It's easy to hide behind the crowd, to hide within the team. There is a personal responsibility to be taken for change. Guys, you've been really good. Thank you very much. You've worked 2 minutes and 2 minutes, and I have quite a rich set of ideas here. Now, if I'd asked you to work for 5 minutes and 5 minutes or 15 minutes and 15 minutes, I think I would have had a treasure trove here. I already have one anyway. So what we will do is I will summarize what you have written in the chat list and circulate it hopefully before the end of the conference in a more readable form. Now, can I just have a little census? How do you feel now? Feel. And speak out loud.
Great.
Goran is feeling great. Thank you. Any more feelings?
Fired.
Fired.
Inspired.
Good.
Inspired.
Thank you. I'm glad. And any other feelings you want to actually share now?
Grateful.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamara.
Happy.
Energized. How you can you can impact the change actually, and how can you turn your fears from change or resistance to change into positive? How can actually contribute to make changes? Because these are quite simple tools, which usually when dealing with something, we do not tend to hire them and to use them. We usually are in the box. Yeah.
Right. And Anna, you see, was the technique useful? Suppose you want to do something and you say, well, for 15 minutes, I'm going to be thinking about the opposite, how to destroy everything. Now, twist, but tell me about your feeling about the technique.
I think that when I initiate change and try to deal with the change, I tend to I understand now. Maybe I tend to more over-explain, instead of using some additional techniques that you have involved more people, and when it comes to my team, and sometimes understanding what is intended with the change is not that. It takes more time to actually my team to understanding what is my intention. So I think that this methodology that we just practice actually helped me to. These are just small mental exercises. How you can beat yourself, first, and maybe better explain the change to myself and ideas, and later on involve team and other stakeholders into change and make change happen.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to add anything on the technique?
Demis, I don't know if you're going to speak about the advice you gave me several years ago in Nicosia and Cyprus when we spoke exactly about these things. So I will not say it unless you intend. I will say it unless you intend it.
Please say it.
I was really troubled with many situations, that ReSPA is doing with many administrations, with many issues, and many times we are frustrated because we really try to give our best and then you can't reach the result and you can't get the positive feedback from all. Of course, nothing is perfect and everything is perfect at the same time, like yin-yang. And I was really trying to understand the concept of thinking and this change management in practice by reflecting devil's advocate situation, because many times when you try to change certain systems and things, you have an ability of the entire audience, team members that are trying really to help you, but by provoking exactly what Demis did with us in the first exercise to give the negative response to the change. And then I was really enlightened by Timmy's words when he says, but why don't you play an angel's advocate? And I said, what? And he says like, yes, I mean, everybody's dealing with the devil's advocate, and it's easy to give, you know, like the argument why not to do something. And then you remember this sentence from Agile, from all these positive psychological tests and seminars, instead of saying yes, but to say yes and. But in practice, this angel advocates was explained exactly by you, Dimis, and I'm really grateful for you, because I was really thinking the entire night and then days after on, that in case you want to give some kind of a feedback on situation, instead of being immediately devil's advocate, think about the 5 reasons why would you support the initiative, and then as a 6th, if there is nothing else to add, give the negative response. So really thank you for this. I mean, simple tip, but it really helped me a lot at this period of time. And I'm really trying to remind myself every now and then, when I'm more devil's advocate, to respect also my role of angel's advocate. So thank you for previous great support and for this fabulous morning.
Thank you. I appreciate your sharing this with everybody, Goran. The technique twist, it's a problem-solving technique which forces you to see things upside down, to make a catastrophe scenario before you make a constructive scenario, before you see them the right way up. So I invite you to use the technique during brainstorming. It's very good because it's very cathartic. I think we all like to be mean a little bit, to look at the negatives, and it gives us a chance to bring it out. But then the other side is very important, the angel's advocate. How can we twist this around? I invite you to use it. I also invite you, and here I will share my screen again. I also invite you to do the following. Read through the chat area. And as I said, I will try and send you a summary of this. Select your favorite twisted responses and make one, or select just one is enough, and make it your personal action point. And I'd like to conclude with a few words, an action story, and a song about change. Yes, the same song, but another verse. Now, the first words, they come from an economist, a great economist in my opinion, John Kenneth Galbraith. Faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving that there is no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof. And what this great economist is telling us is that everybody, most barriers to change are human. It is human to use the yes, but. The second is a poem, and this is a physicist and mathematician, a Danish guy called Pete Hain. I think it's lovely. It's about how we're implementing change. And it says, the road to wisdom, well, it's plain and simple to express. And again, but less and less and less. So make your mistakes, keep making your mistakes, but make them less and less and less. Learn from them, in other words. And the third quote is, if you want something new, you have to stop doing something old. This comes from one of the greatest management thinkers and writers, Peter Drucker, passed away a few years ago. If you want something new, you have to stop doing something old. And the story I'm going to tell you, it's a very short one. It's about Cortés, the conqueror of Mexico in the early 16th century. When he arrived in Veracruz, some of his men did not want to explore the country. They were tired of all that sea, they were tired of the first explorations, and he wanted to go to Teotihuacan, which is today's Mexico City, and meet the Aztecs. And his men were afraid. So what did Cortés do to stop them from doing something old? He burnt the ships. He burnt the ships so they couldn't go back to Spain, which is what they wanted to do. And now I'm going to finish once more with another verse from the same song by Bob Dylan. If you feel like singing along, I'm going to put the words up. If you feel like singing along, unmute and sing along. If you don't feel like singing along, then mute and pretend you are singing. Or do whatever else you like. It's a free world. Let's go. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend a hand, 'cause the times they are a-changing. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I wanted us all to begin with a physical exercise. So physical exercise means something different when you're my age than when you are your age. So here it is. Would you please hold out your arms like this, straight ahead of you, right? And make fists and bring out your index fingers and make your index fingers touch, left and right hand. Now look at the point where they are touching and try to look a little bit beyond that point. See a little bit beyond that point, and now gently, just a little, pull your fingers apart and keep looking a little farther. Do you see a little sausage in the air? If you do, please do this. If you don't, try again. Just keep them together. Look a bit farther down, and then farther than your fingers. Then just gently pull them apart, and there should be a little chipolata, a little salsicha, which is floating in the air. Now, give me a big smile if you did. Great, lots of you did. If you didn't, keep trying, you'll get there. Now, our subject today, you see, I hope you saw the fingers together and the little sausage in the air, because our subject today is paradoxes. It's the heart of innovation, managing apparent paradoxes. And here I go. Now on the screen, do you see a rabbit or do you see a duck?
Both.
Excellent. What about now? Do you see profiles or do you see a vase? Or a vase, if you're in the
profiles.
Okay. Now, do you see an old woman or a young woman? Now, I'm pretty sure many of you may have seen these before. And what about this one here? Is the water here rising or is it falling? Is it going up or is it going down? Now, paradoxes are phenomena that oppose and complement one another at the same time. And paradoxes make sense in more than one way. And to manage them, you must be able to see both the rabbit and the duck, the old woman and the young woman, the profiles and the vase, the waters rising and the waters falling. I propose that at the heart of innovation too, and I'm talking about innovation in organizations, there are apparent paradoxes. And I will explore 4 such paradoxes and offer 4 leadership tips. The first is around the question, should innovation be managed by a small elite, or should it involve all people? Now, it is useful to have a strategy for innovation, to consider the payoffs, the resources you need, the risks, to articulate a vision, objectives, actionable projects, and the decisions that transform visions into value, they fall upon leaders. And this is top-down innovation, so that we're not innovating in a vacuum. But it is also valuable to mobilize the creative skills that all people have, so everybody is actively involved in the organization's future. This is bottom-up innovation. So what's best? Top-down or bottom-up? Well, both actually. Leaders must take their decisions, and they must invite people to generate creative change, to contribute to the big decisions, and to make decisions and create and implement projects of their own. So tip number 1 advises you to design strategy formally and engage people in innovation. So your innovation-friendly minister would make an announcement which is something like this: our leadership team will formulate our innovation strategy and roadmap with the milestones, the projects, the resources, the systems to get there. We expect everybody to actively contribute ideas to the design of the strategy and to the execution of our roadmap. The second paradox is centered on how much innovation should come from individuals and how much from teams. Now, all wealth is created by people working together. In innovative organizations, people brainstorm, they share ideas, they define roles and responsibilities and tasks and deadlines, they take action. Effective teamwork is non-negotiable. But it's rare for breakthrough ideas to emerge from teams. Originality quite often comes from people who are working alone, in the shower, under the tree, by the seaside, not even in the office many times, and certainly not in office meetings. And some people have storms in their brains, but they do not thrive in a brainstorm. For them, meetings are a waste of time. Meetings encourage excessive conformity. Meetings kill good ideas. And people who think like that can be very valuable. But unfortunately, many managers won't tolerate behaviors that threaten the team spirit. So solo or teamwork? Well, both, actually. What leaders must manage is what proportions of solitude and collaboration are best, for whom and at what times. So your emotionally intelligent director would give you tip number 2. Power up both individual and team innovation. And maybe your emotionally intelligent director would say something like, we have challenging expectations for innovation from each person and from all teams. We have physical spaces for individual work and physical spaces for teamwork. And we provide online collaborative platforms and coaching on personal and team development. The third paradox asks, what is your appetite for change and continuity? Innovation is impossible without change, because it's all about doing something new. Something has to change, big or small. Innovation often calls for new structures, new processes, new perceptions of power and status. Innovation cuts into, with the change it provokes, it cuts into work. It also cuts into leisure. And it can cause stress. And at the same time, we're all humans. Organizations and people crave for continuity. Even in today's normal, which is furiously fast change, a lot of disruption, we need breathing space for contemplation and consolidation. Trust me, we do. I have been an evangelist of change most of my life, and I still am. But change and continuity are crucial, and the leadership skill, the trick, if you like, is to maximize the depth and the speed of change while maintaining some kind of continuity in the organization. So tip number 3 beckons leaders to manage change and continuity wisely. So your wise general secretary would say, in our transformation, let us embed periods of consolidation so people take in what is happening and make the best of it. Let us reflect and learn from our mistakes and resist the emergence of new entrenched interests. So if we've broken down silos, let's make sure we're not really creating new ones. The final paradox is a little more philosophical. How do we distribute power between imagination and reason? Yes, the question is, how do we distribute power between imagination and reason? We all find meaning in things we can't rationally explain. Magic, dreams, emotions, spirituality, instincts, if you like. These things are meaningful for us. Then there's logic, there's science, there's cause and effect, facts, deduction, hypothesis, falsifiability, experimentation. I'm sure we all appreciate the immense value of scientific method. But in fact, most great ideas have their origins in non-rational thinking. Newton saw an apple falling from a tree, and he saw the moon out there, and he theorized that they might be governed by the same force, gravity. Einstein imagined he was traveling on a beam of light when he discovered relativity. It started from a strange, absurd idea in his mind. So innovation calls for outcomes that are breathtakingly magical, as well as implementable, therefore logical. Imagination and reason. Use them both, and use them in that order, and you will have a winning formula. So tip number 4 urges you to practice making the impossible possible, and do it systematically. So your creative CEO will will come out and say imagination and reason are very productive companions. I count on all of you to use them both to confront the challenges of our company. No idea, no vision is too impossible for us to consider. And no idea, no vision will fly without questioning, analysis, and judgment. First imagination, then reason. So to summarize, here are the 4 tips again. Design strategy formally and engage people in innovation. Power up both individual and team innovation. Manage change and continuity wisely. And practice making the impossible possible. So let us learn to manage paradoxes. We're in organizations that love organization and method and planning. But let us also learn to live with ambiguity, or even ambiguities. And I quote from a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, Niels Bohr, how wonderful, he said, that we have met with a paradox. Now we have some hope of making progress. And I'd like to conclude with an explorer's tale. In the early 16th century, when it had become clear that Christopher Columbus had discovered a new continent, the Americas, certain Spanish men of letters, they were not impressed, saying, oh, but anybody could have done this. We don't need any special seafaring skills to do that. So in response, Columbus, he picked up an egg like this, and he placed a bet that none of them could make it stand upright on the table. So they all tried, and they all failed. So Columbus then cracked the edge of the egg and balanced it upright on the table, like this. And they said, but that's easy, we could do it too. Well, why didn't you? Replied Columbus. That's innovation, the explorer's way. First imagination, then reason. Thank you very much. So here I come to my to the second part of the session, opportunities in a pandemic and beyond. I hope that soon Slaven will give me the power to create groups. I don't have it at this time, because I will ask you to do a little bit of work in teams. Let me share. This is simply a vanity picture, but I want to remind you what we had, what I propose as a challenge for you, an individual challenge. Imagine one opportunity. Identify one opportunity for public administration in your country or in another country, an opportunity that you believe will bring value in the future. Write this up as a specific action in one sentence or two. Don't be afraid of unusual ideas. And I gave you a site for inspiration. Now, what I would like to do now is ask you to join teams. I will do that when Slaven gives me the power to do that. The opportunity to host, I think. And here's what I will ask you to do.
Sorry, Dimis. Goran has a status of a host at the moment. Goran, can you please just switch it to Dimis?
Okay. So soon you will find yourself in one of 4 teams. So teams will have 4 or 5 people each. And here's what I would like you to do. You will have 10 minutes in the team. In 10 minutes, please discuss the opportunities you identified individually. So you're very pressed for time, but then you're very good. So please spend about half a minute each saying, this is my idea, this is my idea, this is my idea. Then another 3 minutes, a short discussion, and agree on the opportunity that you think is original, it's valuable and implementable. You make a quick snap judgment, which is the best opportunity of our team. And then write it up clearly in 1 sentence or 2 sentences in the chat area, and name a spokesperson to make a 1-minute presentation. I will be very strict with the timing. And so let us share in 10 minutes. Please raise your hand if you are clear about what I have asked you to do. Share the opportunities, decide on one, write it up in the chat line, and decide who your spokesperson will be when we come back. Any questions here? If there are no questions, I will organize breakout rooms. There are 5 breakout rooms. So I will recreate, assign participants to 4 breakout rooms. So all the rooms are recreated. I am opening them now, and I shall close them in 10 minutes. Have great conversations. Welcome back. Can we please hear from team number 1? Would you read out your idea, your opportunity? Lirdi has raised a hand. You have the floor, Lirdi.
Yes. As I said before in the other group, I am the head of Innovation Lab department. This is a public innovation lab, I think the first in the region, if I'm not wrong, regions as well has established an innovation lab. ADISA lab is established like 2 years before. And what I working in my projects, proposed projects, have been like changing the mindset of public servants. And whenever you say a proposal, they used to say like, okay, we are okay with this thing because we always did like this and we don't want to change. So collaboration with public institution is one of the challenges that I have faced during this time. What I proposed, even at in my agency, has been always like building a lab in the government, and not only, also with private or universities as well. The idea is that to expand it in different institutions. This will enable us to build like incubator or a community of innovators that can help us generate more ideas and solutions towards our challenges. This way, we are helping also public institutions having an innovative approach within the organization, and the fact that we will be present in all entities within the government will make easier to collaborate with them, so they accept easily changes and the proposed ideas.
Congratulations, team number one. It is a brilliant idea, an idea sharing platform for the whole government. I think it's great. Anything else from team number one?
Dimis, Tamara to step away, but we had one more idea from Tamara that I just want to share with everyone. What she wrote in chat is she's proposing that we internally and publicly recognize individuals and teams who innovate and promote innovation. And the impetus for that, she said, sometimes the public service is being misjudged, and folks outside don't really see the grit, the resilience, the tenacity of passionate public servants who are behind redesigning digital services and public services. So this would be a way to elevate those voices and the work that public servants are doing and really showcase.
So there's a second idea.
Yes.
Build ways of recognition within public administrations.
Yes.
Thank you. Can we move?
Can I add one thing? Furthermore, I was thinking that maybe because we, in the region especially, we have the same problems and we face the same difficulties, the mindset of our people is like pretty the same. I think that this innovation lab will be easily replicated in the region. And if we have a bigger community, we will have a bigger number of solutions. And we can learn from each other, from failures and from solutions as well.
Excellent. So it is transferable, it is replicable, it is scalable. Bravo.
In the reach.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we give team number two, please, take 1 minute to read us out your idea? Who's your spokesperson?
Goran?
Honestly speaking, I didn't know that you're number two. Anyway, thanks, Dimis. We were having we were cheating a bit because we actually integrated two. The first one is mapping infrastructure, which is adjusted to accessibility standards by using Google Maps. Vladan talked a lot, Milos also, and finally Tihana today with Amna. So I think this example is self-explanatory, but just to clarify that we want to understand what is already giving the possibilities of integrating the people with disabilities into everyday life and functioning of it. And this would be practical, and also it would be some kind of alert for the ones who are influencing, for the ones who can change and further improve this infrastructure that is quite underdeveloped and in a sense of integration of people with disabilities. The other one is more holistic. We did understand the need, similarly to what Lirdi said, to innovate, but our innovation stands beyond physical, infrastructural adjustment and correlation and cooperation between public, private and civic sector. Many times we're having these kinds of relationships, and many times they are formed within different projects, initiatives, working groups. However, we were having a debate that we already have a public-private partnership, so many things that not necessarily institution may finance can be outsourced, or similarly to what the Finland or Austria is doing, for example, for the ITs who usually get out from the public sector because of the low wages attracted by the private, they can have this lateral private organization company who actually gives to those target audiences and profiles higher salaries, by this keeping them in and actually attracting them to stay and collaborate. The same goes with the civic sector. Many times they are seen either as foreign agents, somebody who is usually only criticizing, and sometimes they really learn only to criticize. So in a sense, to give them a responsibility and ownership, they would have to be given accountability and space to actually interact. So that's why we use the word once we discussed crowdsourcing, and it may also be crowdfunding, like public-private partnerships and maybe other donors. So this is quite abstract, and we also thought that our current institutions and buildings not necessarily need to be rebuilt, but they can be adjusted by lazy bags, by engaging local ideas, by crowdsourcing like local artists, local ITs, who can give us idea how to actually make the things better. Like Prime Minister Edi Rama in Albania at the moment when he was a governor of Tirana, he actually colored the facades of the buildings. I remember Tirana before and after, and it really looked a bit better. Somebody may say, oh, it's too colorful, but why not? I mean, if the people are having better emotions, then that's the purpose. So that's how we are actually shaping this. And finally, we also thought about some small things within this physical integration, like to integrate Thanksgiving breakfast once a month. Everybody brings the food, or to have some kind of internal place for standing group meetings for up to 15 minutes with the graphics or some kind of elements that will provoke innovation and that will give us some kind of food for thoughts.
And you can have those meetings, at breakfast, with your Kanban board in the background. Absolutely. At the same space. Okay, that's great. Anything else from team number 3? Who hasn't spoken? I think it's team number 4.
Okay.
Team number 4 had 2 people.
No, actually, a team of 4 also hasn't spoken, or are we maybe group number 5 now? I'm confused.
No, there were 4 groups, but if you want to say something, Nadica, please do. If you have one.
That we have appointed to say the proposal. Suarda, are you with us?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, let me explain that it's not an idea for the administration, even though I work for administration, but it serves to the parents who works in public administration and other private organization or company. For example, this idea came to me after I met yesterday my friend who has 2 little children, twins, 17 months old, and a babysitter company or platform that recruits babysitter based on age, on experience, or something else. For every babysitter, there should be a review that that parents can see it. Is it a good one or how it goes? I see that almost every family who has 1, 2, or maybe even more children has to look for a babysitter, a perfect one. And I think that this platform will help us, will help all this family. I don't know what idea is it, but I think it's something different. And I don't know if there is such platform around the world. Maybe it is.
I think it's I did not expect an idea like that. I'm very glad you shared it with us. It's very timely and it is very valuable for working parents. Very valuable, I'm sure. Does anybody else from Suarda's group want to add something?
I would like to add that the ideas of the rest of the team also complied very well with what Suarda proposed, and that is actually Yasmina's suggestion that there can be a co-creation between the citizens and public administration workers, where they could work on a project, and that project can be exactly this one. Of course, given the amount of public administration workers in the Western Balkans and their families, there may be a lot of interesting citizens to get involved. And Milos's proposal referred to the experimenting with work flexibility and work from home, which has to do with digital transformation, which will become more important, not just now during the COVID-19, but there can be an option for the whole system to continue at work, more flexible systems at work. And my proposal was actually to empower communications departments within all public administration units. And good communications can really boost such initiatives, those previously mentioned ones, including ours, in terms of public campaigning and connecting people and relevant entities, partners, target groups, etc.
Thank you, Nadica. And team number 4?
Hi. Do you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if I am team number 4, but I think it's just the two of us. Yeah, okay. So I am part of a DISA lab, and as I said before, me and Jirdi had the same idea, which was the lab network. So I would, as I presented by my point of view, let's say. So the idea was to build a network of innovators within the government to help the public institutions to have an innovative approach within their organization in order to improve. In other words, a platform where civil servants share their ideas and build trust. They could be more open to each other without maybe criticizing each other or saying that there is a bad idea. There is no bad idea. There are just good ideas accepted by everybody. And also it could be maybe a dedicated place, a dedicated ambient, so they could interact with each other, because the live or face-to-face interaction is always better after COVID.
Thank you very much. It's a brilliant idea. Anything else from Team 4?
No.
Okay. I will then just ask the question, what is it that prevents us from recognizing opportunities? I expected to hear 4, I heard 7 just now, different opportunities. They're there. I'm really hoping that you will grab some of them and actually go out and do it. So, but what is it that that prevents these opportunities? I think it's usually those obstacles and all those problems that cloud our mind. It's the negativity in our own minds. So let's open our mindsets. I want you to imagine with me now. Please imagine that this palm that becomes a fist, this hand that becomes a fist, this is us. It's us with our curious minds, our creative ideas, our enthusiasm, right? And imagine that this black handkerchief, this represents all the negativity, all the useless and fruitless critique, and everything that clouds our minds and other people's minds. And imagine and watch as we, with our positive minds, with our deep curiosity, with our creativity and our enthusiasm, we make all that negativity vanish completely. Thank you all very much. Thank you.